go. We start recording. So we started. So the agenda for the day, brief introductions, everyone. So if you can please use the chat to introduce yourself with your name, what you do, and describing how you feel at the moment using a weather analogy. Then we will go into the research that EthicalFin and the C Collective have performed on the needs of impact investors and entrepreneurs. We will then spend some time on some tips and suggestions on the ideal pitch decks and for fundraising. And we would love to have at least 15 minutes of time for Q&A with you guys and have a roundtable discussion. So if you can please introduce yourself in the chat, that would be great. From our side, for those of you who don't know us, so I am the founder and CEO of EthicalFin. We are a financial advisory company. We assist the sustainable ventures with strategic advice and fundraising support. And we connect our clients with value-aligned investors, and the objective is to promote sustainability at every level.
Thanks, Alessandro. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Marie Geneste. I'm the founder of the C Collective. So we're a boutique consultancy based in London, but also operating in Europe. And we help sustainable entrepreneurs scale up their solution with outstanding user experiences and marketing. So very happy to be here today and share some of our experience and research with you guys.
Thank you. Welcome, Marie. It's great to be here with you.
So if you can switch to the next slide. So back a year ago, we conducted some research for EthicalFin into the impact investment ecosystem. And as a user-centered consultancy, we focused on capturing that research through the prism of user personas. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the concept of user personas, they are hypothetical archetypes of actual users. And contrary to customer segments that are more traditional tools of marketing toolbox, and which are defined by more social and demographic criteria, personas are actually defined by their needs, their motivations, their goals within a specific context. So in this case, the impact investment ecosystem. So this is the overview of the 7 user personas that we put together for EthicalFin when we conducted this research in 2020. We have 2 entrepreneurs personas with different levels of maturity on their management journey and also different impact leadership level. But we're not going to focus on the entrepreneur side. We are more going to focus today on presenting you the investor side. So on the investor side, we reflected the diversity of investors' backgrounds and needs with 4 different personas. They come from different types of financial institutions, and their attitude is also driven by the governance of the fund they represent, but also their kind of personal values and leadership style, and also ability to make change happen from the inside. We also created an influencer persona, joined the impact investment evangelist, which is a sort of secondary persona, but still very important to onboard, especially on comms and PR strategy. If we go to the next slide, Alessandro. Yeah, so this is the first persona, which we call Jasmine, the fired up next gen investor. And what's interesting to see in terms of what we capture, so we do capture some social and demographic criteria, but most importantly, we capture the kind of story of this character. We capture information sources and touch points, because these are super important for your communication strategy and how you're going to engage with them. And we capture the objectives, motivations, and pain points and challenges. Also, we describe the persona through a really interesting model, which is called the Barrett Leadership Model. And maybe Alessandro, you introduced us to this. You want to say a few words about this because it's super interesting.
Yeah, so the Barrett is a research center that has developed very interesting methodologies to assess and measure what we thought would be unmeasurable. So they have created systems to map, human consciousness, human values, human and organizational and even country consciousness and culture levels. And so I think it's a very, very interesting way of assessing where each one of us is in their personal development.
Yeah, thanks. And so for each persona, we've kind of assessed, where they are on that journey of leadership towards more impact. So Jasmine, she's from a family who founded a leading retail group, and following the sale of the group, a family office was founded. And since her late 20s, she's been very active in using the capital inherited for philanthropy and also impact investment. And on the side, she's also quite involved in activism and lobbying for good. Her motivations are really around that, so lobbying people in power to bring that systemic change that she wants to see in the world. She wants to influence more the family office to have active impact investment and measurement, because they are not necessarily doing this at 100% at the moment. And she wants to invest in people who know what they're doing. Her challenges are this potential lack, she's got a hands tied in the sense that she can only influence the investment decision of the family office, that she's not the wealth owner yet. And also she prefers investing through funds because she doesn't necessarily have the capacity or the skills to invest directly in the companies. And generally, she's quite frustrated by the fact that there's too little money flowing into impact. And of course, she's also quite frustrated with greenwashing. Next persona.
Yeah.
Thanks. Then we have Matthias, so a value-driven family office investment manager. So typically has been in this small family office for a long time, spending a lot of time building relationships and looking for deals when the family office is investing. He's passionate about serving the family, but also working with entrepreneurs and help them grow their business. And he's also keen to stay up to date by understanding trends and industry changes. Objectives and motivations of Matthias are really around, being successful in the job, respected and trusted by the family who employs him, working with great people to grow their business, and the passion of trying to find projects with positive impact as well as good financial outcomes. For him, success is really, achieving the goal with a long-term mindset. It doesn't necessarily have to be overachieved. Pain points and challenges are the fact that it's hard to find interesting and non-mainstream investments. He also has the challenge to keep this healthy work-life balance and also dealing with the long-term and short-term at the same time. And he's interested in impact investment, but it's not always an easy one to sell to the family office representatives and decision makers. So he's typically on the evolution stage on the Barrett leadership model. The next investor profile is Steve, so more an institutional investor. So it could be typically from a PE firm. He'd be working there for years, and he would have worked his way up to becoming a partner. So similarly to Matthias, loves working closely with the management team of his portfolio businesses. But he's also got this family and social pressure to look into the impact space more recently. So he doesn't quite know what's the best way to go, he knows it's on his radar. In terms of KPIs and motivations, so the classical multiple and internal rates of return, also looking at impact KPIs, and is also looking at pure impact deals, or also increasing the sustainability of the portfolio companies who would be more mainstream and larger companies. But this will depend on the fund's long mid-term positioning as well, whether they actually want to launch, for instance, a dedicated impact fund, or just increase the positive impact of their existing portfolio. Pain points and challenges for Steve: stress of managing investment, sharing the stress of the CEOs he works with, crisis management, ventures that go bust. So he's got an exciting but time-consuming job, and also the work-life balance is really tough. He's also on the evolution stage of the Barrett leadership model. Next one. So Tariq is the purpose-driven asset manager, or VC, so potentially a younger profile. He's been working in the investment industry for a while as an investment manager in a medium-sized European VC, typically. After 5 years doing this, he's really interested in giving more purpose to his career by finding more deals with a positive impact, or even creating a specialized impact fund. So same sort of KPIs as the institutional investor, and the extra motivation to get people to know you and your ethics, so that you can build a good deal flow, especially in the impact space. Challenges are always on the lookout for special deals, hard to spot the good deals, especially in the impact space, because they often go under the radar. His job is also very exciting but time consuming, and similarly to the more traditional investor, he's got the stress of managing the investments, sharing the one of the CEOs, and the ventures that also go bust, especially in the VC ecosystem. He's also at the evolution stage, closer to the alignment in terms of Barrett leadership model. And the next one, please. And so the next one is the kind of evangelist persona. So really a specialist of the impact investment world. He's been around there for a while. He potentially has his own, of course, his own network, but also he's a thought leader. He has a few contributions at leading news channels, his own podcast. So somebody to be familiar with, somebody to engage with, especially in terms of your PR and comm strategy. So someone to factor in as a secondary persona of the ecosystem. So that's it for persona. So I'd say we always strongly encourage you to do your own research, and also think about who your of course your client personas are going to be, but also your typical investor should be, so that you can find this perfect match between your business and your investors. And we'll talk about that more long-term relationship in the next slides.
Okay, so we can move on to the next section about the deal pitch deck and our tips for fundraising.
So it's always hard to say there's an actual ideal pitch deck, but we just wanted to give you kind of a list of information that impact investors, and investors in general and impact investors will want to get from you at different stages of the engagement. So this is a modular list of things that they want to see and understand from you. And also we advise to develop them in different formats, starting with maybe a short 10 to 15 slide deck. So what we want to hear from you as impact investors. So what's the story? What is this? Who and what is the source of the idea? The problem you are solving. So why you are solving it better than the competition or the status quo offering out there. Of course, your positive impact has to be articulated really precisely. So referring to the SDG framework is a good starting point. But also make sure that you translate your impact into tangible benefits. So tons of carbons are great, but sometimes a lot of people don't relate to this. So find alternatives to make them more relatable. Product and value proposition articulation are super important elements of your pitch. Also talk about your technology. So is there any IP protection patents already out there? That is going to be a reassuring factor for investors. Describe the market opportunity you're going for, the size and structure of your ecosystem. Don't forget to mention competition. There's always going to be competition, even if it's indirect. It's important to make sure you've done your homework on this aspect. Then talk about your go-to-market strategy. So what's the route to market? What kind of channels are you going to use? What is going to be the user experience that you've designed? And then talk about the traction. So if you have started already, do you have a customer base? Do you have a pipeline of deals or opportunities? You already have investors or grants that have been supporting you before the stage of fundraising. And then the management team. So that is super important. A nice, series of positive headshots and bios with your relevant experience elements will always be super appreciated. And then for the financials, maybe Alessandro, you're best placed to comment on these bits.
Yeah, sure. So especially for the long form deck, which is shared with investors, you may want to share your past financial performance with the accounts, and consistently also how those financial results are projected into the future, providing P&L, balance sheet, and cash flow projections with very clear underlying assumptions, what is driving those projections and why they make sense. Then it's very important also to be very clear about your ask, what you're asking for, how much money you're raising, what are the terms that you're looking for, and what is your timeline. So, burn rate and current raise. And even though sometimes can be quite theoretical, especially in the earlier stage of development of the company, investors will always want to hear what are your exit considerations. So what do you imagine the exit of the company will be? And also how you want to go about it. So that's always topic of conversation. So be prepared for that.
Okay, thanks. And if you can show the next slide, just to close on the deck. Actually, there's not one deck. There's potentially a toolkit which will allow you to produce several decks based on the context or which stage in the conversation you are, how it's going to be delivered, is it going to be presented, is it going to be sent over email, and also you should be adapting this to the investor persona, and especially if you understand what they are most interested in. So, to summarize, but it's not a one size fits all, but ideally you'd have at least 3 types of pitch deck. So you'd have a teaser, which is a 1 or 2 pager that you can add to an email and that you would send together with a nicely articulated recap email so that people want to actually open it. You'd have your classic 10 to 15 pages pre-NDA deck with some stuff in the appendix if you have a lot of things to share. And similarly, make sure you really polish your introduction email, just like a cover letter, basically. And then you would have a more long form post NDA presentation, slide deck, or even a Word document, maybe 15, 25 pages, and appendixes to share a bit more your business plan. So that's broadly what you should have and aim for, and then it's based on your judgment, you'll know what's the best thing to use in the context.
Perfect, exactly. Okay, we're moving on quite nicely, Marie. Very good, smooth presentation so far. So we thought it would be also useful to share some insights and suggestions based on our experience in supporting entrepreneurs with their fundraising and being investor ready. So some highlights. So one consideration is that fundraising never stops, for even for more mature companies. So it's really an ongoing process. People also tend to leave it a bit too late, in terms of timing. Instead, it's very important to prepare in advance and provide for contingencies, because fundraising plans, can sometimes take longer than one would imagine. As Marie was saying before, communication strategy is key in terms of your message and deliverables. Consider also that there is a lot of help out there, so look for that. There can be peer groups, there can be government-sponsored support, there can be incubators, and of course, you can also go for paid for support. Finding the right investors, the right advisors. So whether that's trusted lawyers, trusted financial advisors, or trusted communication advisors. I think that's part of the team that you are using to succeed with your fundraising. Bear in mind that preparation is also very important, and be patient. As I said, it can take quite some time. I also would like to stress the importance of the personal and the human connection. At the end of the day, investors are, human beings like us, and you establish a relationship which can be very long-term. So it's not just about thinking about the institution that is investing, but, who are the people, and how can you really create a rapport, a personal relationship with that. And last but not least, actually, I will expand on that in the next slide. It's very, very important to establish a balanced relationship with investors. So of course, before we think about the relationship, it's important to find the right investors. So Marie already suggested before, she was mentioning the importance of doing your research, finding the various personas. So preparation and an early start is always useful. Doing a lot of research. There are quite a bit of resources out there available. You can look at your competitors, investors. You can look at conferences. You can look at LinkedIn, as you can imagine. Imagine you already do. I think it's also very important to work with trusted advisors who have the experience of dealing with the search for investors and thinking also out of the box in terms of who might be a good partner at the specific point in time you're in. Either by yourself or working with your advisors is also very important to define a reach out strategy, not only in terms of material, so the various presentations and investor decks you prepare, and teaser material, but also how to approach the target investors. So once you have sort of identified and started discussing your raise with investors, one element that I've noticed over the years is that in the entrepreneur's mind, the relationship with investors is always one way. So the investor asking questions and doing the due diligence in order for the entrepreneur to show that, they are eligible and a good investment. But, I would also strongly suggest that this relationship is actually a two-way relationship. And the objective is to create and establish a balanced long-term relationship with investors. So I would encourage you to ask a lot of questions, any questions that come to, and any questions that come to mind, and also listening to your gut feeling, so that you can really understand who you have in front of you. In doing so, you can also leverage the experience of your advisors, if you have advisors supporting you. A very good test is the first draft term sheet, because that really sets the tone of the type of investors you are dealing with as lead investors. And more generally, the personal relationship means creating really and finding resonance with people. So enjoying working together, enjoying each other's presence, because at the end of the day, you will become long-term partners. And, one of the tests that I like to use is the beer test. So, maybe, in COVID times, it was more difficult, but now that we're out of the wood,
that one.
I think it's very important to, go out for a drink and get to know the investors on a personal level in order to find the resonance. Some more tips that we can come up with. Of course, I always stress the importance of being authentic. So being yourself, showing clearly your vision for the business, so without being afraid of that. A very important role in the organization is the founder, so the person who had the idea. And there is the whole theory around the source, which was developed by Peter Koenig, which is very, very interesting, and I'm quite intrigued by. Very important also is the team. So not only how you present the team, but you as a team, how you work together and show those detailed team dynamics, during the pitching process and the getting to know process. I also consider the qualitative aspects to be very important in your pitching. So in addition to the quantitative aspects, so both, talking to the brain, but also talking to the heart of the investors, finding the right balance. Of course, based on your sensitivity of the persona you have in front of you. And very important to understand the broader ecosystem. Marie, before mentioned the importance of doing your research on, especially on competition, finding players in the ecosystem that could be maybe partners or competitors. That is really really important, and I notice sometimes it's overlooked. Same way as the competition analysis. Sometimes entrepreneurs pride themselves of having created a technology which has no competition, but that might come across as quite naive, because competition could be either existing competitors doing exactly the same thing, but it could be the status quo or indirect competition, as we were saying before. Another suggestion is not second guessing investor questions, trying to really understand what they are getting at. Trying to be concise, so not being too long in the presentation. That first impressions are very important, and for that, preparation and rehearsal is, I think, is useful, because you can be much more effective. And another suggestion is, especially for impact investors and people aligned, with your values, is to really recognize the value of money and capital, being the input and the output of the organization, but never the purpose, really. On the soft side, let's say, of creating the right rapport with with investors and attracting the right investors, I keep stressing the importance of being authentic, because that's really will mean that you can attract and connect the right people. If you can find a way of, you as a leader or the founder of the organization to create an alignment between your vision and purpose with the way that the company evolves, you can create a company culture which is very much consistent with your vision and purpose. And that leads to more resonance, resonance in values and resonance in visions with everyone that the organization comes into contact with. So, new employees, the co-workers, the investors that you attract, and in general, all the stakeholders. And I believe that the starting point of that is, in addition to, of course, the business, the technology, and everything we've discussed, but on a personal level, it's very important to work on your own self-awareness. Know thyself. Know thyself. It's quite philosophical, but I think it's very important because through self-awareness, you can really attract and connect and create resonance with the right investors, and I would say in general the right people. And self-awareness is a matter of personal experience, or it can be a matter of working on coaching and finding the right support to continue your journey of self-awareness. And so my last suggestion is to really stick to your clarity of purpose and vision to really make it happen the way it's supposed to happen.
Great. Thanks, Alessandro. So we're going to go to the Q&A part. So I've already spotted a couple of questions in the chat, and feel free to ask more. So there was a specific question about finding impact investors in India. I mean, that might be a tricky one. And do you want to take that one first, Alessandro? How can you help us identify some key impact investors in India from Prana Prasad? Okay.
So we currently do not operate in India. We are focused on the UK and the European market. There are surely a lot of impact investors in India. I'm trying to think. There is the Impact Breakfast Club, which has been created by an impact investor in the UK, which has also activities in India. But yeah, from the top of my mind, I cannot come up with any Indian specific Indian focused impact investors. We know some VCs which are impact funds which operate on a global basis, but I can't think from the top of my mind at the moment for an Indian investor.
Thanks, Ali. Yeah, do you want to add something? Or should we go to the
No, I saw another question in the chat.
Yeah, about the lead. Yeah, if we're talking with a number of impact investors, how is the process in which one investor takes the lead for the round? So that's for Marcella. I don't know if you want. Yeah, that's a good one for you.
Yeah, very interesting question. Yeah, so typically the lead investor emerges as the round takes shape. And the lead investor can be an investor which is a very expert investor in the specific sector, in the specific area of operation of the company. So if they have specific expertise, they can perform a much more detailed due diligence and therefore lead the round. Another element of leading the round is for investors who have the ability to write bigger checks. So, size matters in that sense. So the larger investor in the round can act as the lead investor. And what that means is, it's the entity that really negotiates the terms of the round. So, starting from the term sheet, what are the sort of the features of the shares being issued, the characteristics of the round, and the capital raise, and also a very important element for negotiation between the entrepreneur and the founders, the existing investors as well. And then the lead investor is the valuation. And so that's a very important element for deciding the lead investor, which is someone who wants to lead also the valuation of the company. So what in our experience we've been doing to support some of our clients is also to do work ourselves on the company valuation. So what we do is we test and we audit the financial model assumptions of the entrepreneur. We ensure that they are strategically make sense, and that they are assumptions that make sense and are defendable. And on the basis of the financial model that we think is defendable and achievable by the team and the company in terms of execution capabilities, in terms of time to market, in terms of time to acquisition of clients, for sales and to drive sales and turnover, and also the time to market. I think that these are very important assumptions for that drive the financial model. Then one of my colleagues, Fabio, who is the head of corporate finance, is an expert in valuation as well. And so what we do is we create our own assessment of the company value, and this is a very important starting point for the conversation with the lead investor on valuation. Sorry, it was a bit a long answer, but I wanted to add this color. I thought it was important.
Yeah, hope it was useful, Marcella, and for the others as well. The next question is how to find the right balance between the tell me more pre-NDA and post-NDA pitch content. I'm happy to take this one, and maybe you can add something, Alessandro.
Sure.
Well,
thank you.
I think it's, bluntly speaking, take this engagement process or relationship building with the investor as a dating process. So you have to get that first date in some way, and this is what your teaser or your pre-NDA 10 to 15 page deck is going to be here for. Open that door so that you have that first conversation, which is more informal. But yeah, you just have to go through it, and in the kind of content that we talked about earlier, within those 10 to 15 slides, there's already a lot of content. And if you're doing the job right, yes, this should be amply enough information for the investor to want to speak to you or not. And in a similar way, that's why we're saying, polish those email that, especially when you're, sort of contacting investors out of the blue, polish those intro emails so that they want to open the attachment to your email, basically. Yeah, so that's my 2-cent response to this.
Yeah,
thank you. To add?
Yeah, maybe, what I like to add is, the fine balance, pre and post NDA, I think is very much driven by the sensitivity of the information you share with investors. So what you have to think about is, what if the information I'm putting in my pre-NDA deck ends up in the hands of my direct competitor? And that's exactly, I think that's the test for defining what goes in a pre-NDA document. And typically this is connected to to two main areas. One is the IP content, so not sharing any details around your IP information, so that it can be protected. And secondly, as importantly, is the commercial information. So information about who your clients are, what your revenues are, and because this is information that is quite sensitive if again ends up in the hands of your competitor, your competition.
Thanks, Alessandro. There's another question. Hang on, next one. Any good tools that you recommend for researching investors, such as Deal Room?
Yeah, so there are a lot of quite sophisticated tools. I mean, research can be done, in many forms. So, one source is, or research is, looking at, deal information, press releases of companies in the same sector. So we do a lot of that. And so and then identifying the investors who took part in the round. There are very powerful tools like PitchBook, for instance, CB Insights or Crunchbase, which are subscription based. So that requires quite a bit of capital, to pay for those services, but they can be quite useful. So we have subscribed in the past to some, and we constantly revisit the tools that we use. LinkedIn is, as you can imagine, quite powerful and effective, and also a lot of information can come also from networking. So we do a lot of we do a lot of research also within our own network. Looking for referrals and recommendations. I think that's also quite useful.
Yeah, thanks for that. The next question is a really good one. So what percentage of no replies to an investor email should we expect, and what's the maximum number of follow-ups before we abandon an investor lead? Tricky one. Here is one for you, Alessandro.
Yeah, I don't have the statistics of all the percentage of replies, but yeah, it depends, whether you are cold calling or you're reaching out to existing investors. I mean, my experience is that emails are people are quite bombarded with emails, so I think the percentage of no replies is quite high. So I wouldn't be discouraged by that, because people are busy. Email boxes are flooded, and it's quite normal for people not to respond. My personal rule in terms of maximum number of follow-ups is that I would stop after probably 3 emails. So that's I would imagine that if someone doesn't respond after 3 emails, is a no-go. But ideally, it's always important to follow up with a call. It's been very difficult, during COVID, because people have been working from home. So unless you have, someone's mobile number, a lot of communication has moved, into email even more than before over the last 18 months. So that I think it has not helped in a way, because people working from home are more difficult to reach by phone. So fortunately, with our investor network, we have mobile phones for them, And so we typically follow up, with a call or a WhatsApp to ensure that the people have seen, have received the email.
So be persistent, and also go for a kind of multi-channel approach in case people haven't had time to respond or engage with your first touch point, basically.
Yeah.
Next one, in terms of engaging a financial advisor as bridge to investment, how much time of the pre-work is needed? Rough estimate. I'm not sure. Do you understand the question? Yeah.
In terms of engaging a financial advisor as a bridge to investment. So I imagine that it's so working with a financial advisor for a bridge financing for a capital raise, I guess.
Yeah, Corey, yeah. Do you want to just unmute and make sure we understand?
Sorry about that. Let me clarify. Thank you. So I'm just thinking that in terms of like looking out to consultancy or advisors to connect to outside to reach out to investors. What are like how much time should a corporation like enterprise to allocate before start reaching out with the to the investors?
Okay, I understand. Okay, thanks, Tori.
Okay,
so it's I mean there is a lot of variability on a case-by-case basis, depending on a number of factors. So we personally, at EthicalFin, we try and spend quite some time to get to know each other well, and to understand the investor readiness of the companies we work with. And then there is the time also for agreeing and signing the commercial agreement. So that could be, probably a matter of, I think, a few weeks typically. So we've been able to engage in the past, from anywhere from, 2-3 weeks, all the way to sometimes longer, because, as we get to know each other, we can also sometimes take longer to engage for a round. It could be like a couple of months sometimes. And that in terms of pre-work, again, it really depends on where the company is at. So we normally do a gap analysis. So we try to understand the quality and the availability of the material. So understanding the quality of the deck, looking at the quality of the business plan, how robust it is, and the financial model as well. And so once we get a sense of that, we normally then discuss a scope of work, and the scope of work is typically agreed and understanding. So what needs to be done in order to reach the level of investor readiness that we desire, and how much work needs to be done. And the work that needs to be done, we then discuss as a combined team. So us and the client, we discuss as a combined team how the work gets allocated. And so depending on who does what, we can then agree on the actual fees that EthicalFin will charge for the work. It could be anywhere between £10,000 for a light touch review to something like 25 or 30,000 pounds for more involvement, let's say, on the various aspects of the round.
Thanks, Alessandro. I hope this was helpful, Corey.
Thank you.
Next question from Brenna. So if your gut feeling tells you no, how do you politely refuse the investor because you're not getting the amount you were targeting for funding? Or should we just adjust with the low funding amount as it's the first round of funding?
You are not getting the amount you are targeting for funding. Okay, so typically what normally happens is that a capital raise involves more than one investor, so not necessarily only one investor, and so that means that if one investor is investing less than you are targeting, that doesn't mean that the round doesn't get completed. So that's the first point. The second point is saying no to an investor. In our experience, our clients have said no to investors, not necessarily linked to the quantum of investment they're willing to make, but more importantly because of the alignment, whether they can really add value and whether they can really support the company after the round, or whether they are coming up with terms which are too aggressive. Sometimes we've seen more old-fashioned traditional venture capital funds trying to squeeze the founders and trying to position themselves in a better way than existing investors. And that has really been putting off, the entrepreneurs, and so those are, let's say, good examples of when an entrepreneur has said no to an investor, and you politely explain exactly, what you feel, what you don't like about the terms, or what you don't like about the alignment. So that's what I would say. You can also you can also reduce. You're saying you're saying here you should adjust to the low funding amount. So that's on a case-by-case basis, you can decide, exactly what you can do. So sometimes, companies can agree on a smaller round, and so you just close the round with a smaller amount. And it's very important in that situation to fine-tune the deliverables, fine-tune the benchmarks, the milestones that the company will try to achieve with the lower funding, because at the end of the day you are committing your capital to achieving certain progress and certain milestones. And so by reducing the round, that typically means that you are reducing your runway, and you are probably reducing your targets. And it's very important for everyone, for the team and for the investors, to be clear about what's the implications for the business plan of a smaller raise.
Thanks, Alessandro. Cool. I think this was the last question, unless there's a new one. What is the Prana again? What is the best method of valuation at seed stage? Ooh, that's a good question.
This would be a question for Fabio, but of course, so the best valuation for a seed stage company, it's normally the one that is called the venture capital method, which means you create a financial plan for the company, looking at in the future 5 to 10 years financial projections. You then imagine and assume an exit in the future that can be after, let's say, 3 or 5 or even 7 years. You then crystallize at that point in time how the company looks like financially at that point in time, in terms of turnover, EBITDA, and profitability. And you're using valuation methodologies on looking at comparables of companies in the same sector, you determine the future value of the company at an exit point. You then establish what the net present value of that future value is today by looking at, by calculating the net present value with a reasonable discount rate, which is, of course, a discount rate which is commensurate with the high risk of an early stage company and the typical returns that venture capital funds expect on a portfolio basis. So it can be a very high rate, like 30, 40, 50% higher, discount rate. And by doing that, you net present value the future value of the company to today. In addition to that, you can also look at comparables, how competitors in the same sectors have been valued at the same round, the seed stage, and how much they raised. And lastly, you could also run a discounted cash flow valuation, but that's the most unreliable one because, of course, you are discounting, future cash flows, which are totally, based on the assumptions you made in your model. But these three methods normally we would use at the same time, so that we have a good benchmark across the three methodologies.
Great, thanks. That was a technical question. I hope you made notes. I certainly did. So this leads us to the conclusion of this webinar. Do you want to talk about the pitch clinic, Alessandro?
Yeah, I was wondering, we should probably mention this now.
Yeah.
We can follow up, with an email. But Marie and I have thought it would be very useful to make accessible all the experience we have gained over the years in supporting entrepreneurs with their fundraising and investor readiness. Creating a clinic, a 1 hour dry run session for your pitch to get very precise and extremely useful, hopefully, feedback from Marie and myself, looking at, how to improve your pitch. So, we would, what we promise is, very honest and useful and constructive feedback and suggestions on how to improve your storytelling and content of your deck, the quality and delivery of the presentation, the feel and look of your slides, how professional they are, the clarity of your problem statement and value proposition, your business model, how that sounds from an investor's point of view, the overall credibility of your proposition, and in general, the investor readiness. So with very precise feedback that can hopefully give you the tools to increase your confidence in your fundraising. So let me, what I can do is
I've shared the link in the chat, but we'll also share the presentation and the link to the clinic. I'm also going to share contact details for myself and Alessandro. And I was telling you, feel free to save the chat in Zoom. There's a really simple way to do that by just clicking on the 3 dots at the bottom right. And then you can just save the whole chat. I've seen a lot of contact details being exchanged. And of course, the question, also some people shared some tips. I think Anuj offered to help with CB Insight because he's got a paid membership, so he can do some crunching for you. Very kind. So yeah, feel free to save the chat. I'm also putting Alessandro's details in there in case you connect. But yeah,
excellent.
Thank you very much. Let's keep those conversations going. I know that you have everybody's details. And yeah, thank you for your time today and listening and asking some really good questions as well.
Yeah, thank you very much for your beautiful questions. And I hope it was useful for you and enjoyable. And look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.